For most of a century, selling yellow margarine in America was a crime. 32 states wrote laws about the color of a spread. 3 of them demanded it be dyed pink instead. And the last of those laws did not fall until 1967. I went through the original patents, the Supreme Court ruling that broke them, and the Senate speeches that defended them. What was at stake was never a condiment. It was who got to decide what butter is, and who got to sell it. And men went to a federal penitentiary for getting that wrong. You have probably heard that margarine was fought because it was fake, or because it was dangerous. It was neither. For 90 years, America legislated the one thing about margarine that could never hurt anybody. Open your refrigerator. Whatever tub is sitting in there is a good chance you have heard the line about it. That margarine is 1 molecule away from plastic. It is a good line. It is also chemically impossible. Margarine is made of triglycerides, fat, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Plastics are synthetic polymers pulled out of petroleum, long chains of carbon and hydrogen, with no oxygen in them at all. They are not neighbors. They are not in the same family, but the story sticks. Therefore, it is worth asking where it came from. And the answer is that it was manufactured, deliberately, more than 100 years ago, by people whose income depended on you believing it. Today, that war is effectively over. Americans ate 6.8 pounds of butter per person in 2024, an all-time record, more than in any year the government has on file, including 1965. Margarine sits under 3 pounds and has been falling since the 1990s. Butter has pulled dramatically ahead of it in the spreads aisle. Butter won, but it did not win the way you think, and it did not win the argument it claimed to be having. Because here is what almost nobody knows about the thing in that tub. The first margarine ever made was not vegetable oil. It was beef, rendered beef fat, washed, pressed, and warmed with milk. And to get it to behave like butter, its inventor added one more ingredient that reads today like something out of a horror film: crushed tissue from a cow's udder. That was not a shortcut. That was the entire theory. In his American patent, he described the invention as the result of physiological investigation. What he was attempting, in his own words, was to reproduce artificially the work a cow performs inside her own body when she turns her fat into butter. He was not trying to fake butter. He was trying to build a cow. And the reason he was trying at all was that an emperor had asked him to. In 1866, the government of Napoleon III made a public announcement. France needed a substitute for butter, something cheaper, something that would keep. And it needed it for 2 groups in particular: the Navy and the people who could no longer afford the real thing. That sounds like charity. It was arithmetic. France was emptying its countryside into its cities. Fewer people were making butter and far more people were buying it. Therefore, the price climbed. And a navy that had to feed sailors for months at sea could not keep fat from turning rancid in a barrel. There was no cash prize attached to the offer. What the winner would get was the patent and the government's name behind it. 3 years later, a chemist named Hippolyte Mejmoriès collected it. He was a pharmacist by training, working out of the Hôtel Dieu, the old teaching hospital on the island in the middle of Paris. He already held patents, though not for anything you would expect. His earlier work was on bread and fermentation. He was, in the language of his time, a man who studied what living bodies do to food. What he built was not a recipe. It was a factory floor compressed into a laboratory bench. Fresh beef fat went between rollers under a running jet of water, crushed rather than melted. It was washed and washed again. Then came the strangest step. He digested it, first with macerated sheep's stomach, and later with an extract taken from a cow's udder to break the tissue away from the fat. What was left was melted, strained, poured into boxes to harden, cut into blocks, wrapped in cloth, and pressed between warm plates. Then he brought it to 104 degrees Fahrenheit and stirred in water carrying bicarbonate of soda, cold milk casein, mammary tissue, and yellow coloring. Read that last part again. Yellow coloring. It was written into the original formula, patented in Paris on the 15th of July, 1869, before a single American had ever seen the stuff. The color was not a later trick invented to deceive shoppers. The color was part of the invention. He called what came out of the process preserved butter. And then his story does something almost no inventor's story does. It ends badly, and it ends fast. In 1871, he sold the rights to a Dutch firm called Jurgens. He died in 1880, poor. Jurgens went on to merge, in 1929, into the company we now call Unilever, one of the largest food businesses on earth. built on a patent its inventor let go of for a fraction of what it was worth. But the strangest thing Margarine left behind was not the process, and it was not the fortune he never collected. It was the name. Margarine is named after a substance that does not exist. To understand why that matters, you have to go back another 56 years, to a different French chemist. In 1813, Michel-Eugène Chevreul was pulling animal fat apart to understand what soap and candles were actually made of. Working with pork fat, he isolated something that formed pale, glinting crystals, and he concluded he had found a new fatty acid. He named it after the Greek word for pearl, margaric acid. Chevreul was one of the great chemists of the century. He was also, in this specific case, wrong. In the 1850s, a German chemist named Wilhelm Heinz took the same material apart with better tools and found that Chevreul's pearl was not one substance at all. It was a blend of two acids that were already known, palmitic acid and stearic acid, mostly the first, with a smaller share of the second. There was no new compound. There was a mixture that happened to crystallize beautifully. Now, be careful here, because this is the point where the story usually gets told badly. Margaric acid does exist today. Heinz went on to make the genuine article in 1857, a 17-carbon fatty acid, heptadecanoic acid, which turns up in traces in animal fat and in dairy. The name was recycled onto a real compound. But the substance Chevreul described in 1813, the thing that gave margarine its name, was never in the jar. So the most successful butter substitute in history is named after a chemist's error by an inventor who was trying to imitate an organ for an emperor who lost his throne the year after he handed out the prize. And still, none of that is what made margarine dangerous. That came later, and it came from a completely different direction. On the 27th of February, 1901, a German chemist named Wilhelm Normann ran hydrogen through oleic acid over a nickel catalyst, and the liquid went solid. He filed for a German patent on the 14th of August, 1902. What Normann had found was a way to take any cheap liquid oil and harden it on demand. Here is what is happening at the scale of a single molecule. A liquid oil is built from fat chains with a kink in them, like an elbow. Kinked chains cannot stack neatly against each other, therefore they slide past one another, and the oil pours. Hydrogenation straightens those chains out. Straight chains stack like rods in a bundle, therefore the fat sets solid. That is the whole trick. But partial hydrogenation leaves a third state behind. Some chains do not fully straighten, and they do not stay kinked either. They flip into a shape called trans. Hydrogens on opposite sides of the bond, the chain running almost straight, but structurally unlike anything in the animal fats people had been eating for as long as there had been people. Nobody at the time thought that mattered. Why would they? It was the same atoms. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, the beef was already on its way out. An American named Henry Bradley had patented a process combining cottonseed oil with animal fat back in 1871, and through the 1900s and 1920s, American producers shifted steadily from tallow toward vegetable oil. Cottonseed first, then soybean. It was cheaper, and there was more of it. By the 1950s, most American margarine was hydrogenated vegetable oil, which is to say that by the time America finished arguing about margarine, margarine was no longer the thing America had started arguing about. Margarine reached America in 1873, when Margarine was granted his patent there on the 30th of December. The first commercial production started in New York, under a company called the United States Dairy Company, somewhere between 1874 and 1876. Within 10 years, 37 margarine companies were operating in the country. For dairy farmers, that arithmetic was not a business problem. It was an extinction event. What followed was one of the most aggressive lobbying campaigns of the 19th century. Therefore, it is worth being precise about what was actually said, because it was not subtle. Margarine was described in print as the slag of the butcher shop. It was said to be made from diseased hogs and dead dogs. Reports claimed it caused insanity. Some claimed it carried the germs of cancer. Its opponents argued that it threatened the family farm, the American way of life, and the moral order. In that order, none of it was true. All of it worked. On the 2nd of August, 1886, President Grover Cleveland signed the Oleomargarine Act. It put a tax of 2 cents on every pound, and it added annual license fees designed to price small operators out of existence entirely. $600 for manufacturers, $480 for wholesalers, a smaller fee for retailers. The tax alone didn't stop people from cutting corners, so the government made examples. Federal agents went after manufacturers who sold margarine, mislabeled as butter, or reused tax stamps to dodge the levy, and some of them didn't just pay a fine. They went to prison for it, men convicted under the act and sent to the federal penitentiary at Leavenworth. This was never a paperwork dispute dressed up as one. It was a law with teeth, and the teeth landed on real people. 6 states went further and banned the product outright: Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Wisconsin, which passed its ban in 1895. But the taxes did not do what the dairy lobby wanted. Therefore, the strategy changed. If you cannot stop people from selling margarine, you can stop them from selling it in a color anybody wants to buy. Vermont went first, in 1884. New Hampshire and South Dakota followed, both in 1891. Their laws did not ban margarine. They required it to be dyed pink, not labeled pink, dyed. A tub of pink fat, on a breakfast table, by order of the state. How many states passed anti-color laws in total depends on who you ask, and that deserves to be said plainly, because the number gets thrown around carelessly. Some counts put it at 26, others put it at 32, out of the 45 states that existed at the time. The gap is a question of what you are counting. Only the laws banning yellow, or also the laws demanding pink and the other coloring restrictions. Either way, the majority of the country had a law on the books about the color of a spread. The pink laws lasted 14 years. In 1898, the Supreme Court heard Collins against New Hampshire and struck them down, 7-2. Justice Rufus Peckham wrote that although the statute technically permitted the sale, its necessary effect was prohibition. Coloring the product that way, in his words, excites a prejudice and strengthens a repugnance, to the point of an absolute refusal to buy it at any price. The court then pointed out exactly where that logic went. If New Hampshire could demand pink, it could demand blue, or red, or black. It could require an offensive smell while it was at it. It was a total victory for the margarine industry. It changed almost nothing, because the pink laws were the sideshow. The yellow bans survived, and the fight over those was about to turn into something genuinely strange. In 1902, Congress amended the act and stopped pretending. Colored margarine would be taxed at 10 cents a pound. Uncolored margarine would be taxed at 1/4 cent. The law was no longer about fraud or safety or the family farm. It had a price list, and the price was for the color. It was during that fight that Senator Joseph Quarles of Wisconsin stood up and said that butter should come from the dairy, not the slaughterhouse. He wanted butter, he said, with the natural aroma of life and health. He declined to accept a substitute matured under the chill of death and flavored by chemical tricks. That is the actual register of the debate. Not economics, not chemistry, aroma, and death. But manufacturers found the gap in the law within months. Therefore, the strangest domestic ritual in American food history began. They sold the margarine white, legal, cheap, taxed at 1/4 cent, and they dropped a capsule of yellow dye into the package alongside it. You bought the fat and the color separately, in the same bag, and you performed the illegal part yourself, in your own kitchen. People still remember doing it. You squeezed the capsule until it burst, then kneaded the bag for several minutes, like bread dough, until the streaks disappeared and the whole thing turned the exact color no store in your state was allowed to sell you. Children were handed the bag as a chore. Some of them enjoyed it. It went on in millions of American kitchens for roughly 50 years, and where the bans were absolute, people simply drove. Wisconsin held its ban from 1895. Minnesota held its own. Families made what were openly called oleo runs, crossing into Illinois or Iowa, loading the trunk with yellow margarine, and driving home with contraband groceries. What finally broke the deadlock wasn't outrage. It was the Second World War. Butter went into rationing books alongside sugar and gasoline, and for the first time, millions of American households who had never touched margarine were handed no choice at all. They ate it, they cooked with it, and by the time the war ended and rationing lifted, an entire generation no longer flinched at the idea of it. The dairy lobby had spent 60 years convincing Americans that margarine was contraband. The War Department undid that in 4. The federal tax fell in 1950. Minnesota gave up in 1963. Wisconsin held out longer than any state in the country, and its ban did not fall to a lawsuit or a lobbyist. It fell to a taste test. In 1965, inside the Wisconsin state capitol in Madison, the state Senate staged the moment that finally broke it. Someone set out unmarked squares of butter and margarine, cut identically, for members to taste blind, one after another. Senator Gordon Leverich refused to take part at all. He told colleagues he wasn't going to hand the repeal side any ammunition. Gordon Roseleep had no such hesitation. He was in his early 50s, a Korean War veteran from the small dairy town of Darlington, and for years he had been the band's loudest and most stubborn defender on the Senate floor. He had eaten butter his entire life. He knew what butter tasted like. Most of the room got it right. 32 senators correctly picked out the butter square. Roseleep did not. He tasted the margarine and called it butter. The room laughed before he understood why. It followed him for the rest of his career, and it got crueler with time. Roseleep died in 1989, still remembered in Wisconsin political lore as the man who couldn't tell the difference. It was only after his death that his family told the part he had never known while he was alive. For years, his own wife had been quietly buying margarine across the state line in Iowa and serving it to him at their own table as butter because she believed it was better for his heart. The senator who built his career defending real butter from the counterfeit had been eating the counterfeit at home the entire time and never once caught it. 2 years after the taste test, on May 24, 1967, Governor Warren Knowles signed the repeal, 72 years after the ban was written. That is the story that gets told. Here is the part that does not. While America spent those 72 years passing laws about a pigment, the thing that actually made margarine dangerous walked in through a door nobody was guarding. Norman's hydrogenation went industrial in the 1910s and 1920s. Partially hydrogenated oil became the backbone of the American margarine industry, and with it came the trans fats, the straightened, flipped chains that no legislature anywhere had a word for. The first serious suspicion did not surface until 1981, when Welsh researchers raised the possibility of a link to heart disease. In 1990, a Dutch-controlled trial showed that trans fats pushed low-density lipoprotein, the harmful cholesterol, upward, while pulling the protective kind down. Harvard work followed in 1993. By 1994, epidemiologists were putting tens of thousands of American cardiac deaths a year at its door. The finding that settled it came in 2006, in the New England Journal of Medicine. Dariush Mozaffarian and his colleagues pooled prospective studies covering around 140,000 people. A 2% increase in energy intake from trans fat was associated with a 23% higher incidence of coronary heart disease. The Food and Drug Administration finally ruled in June 2015 that partially hydrogenated oils were no longer generally recognized as safe. Manufacturers had until June 2018 to stop adding them, and until the start of 2021 to clear the last of the stock. How many lives that saved is genuinely contested, and the range is wide. The agency's own projection was around 7,000 deaths and 20,000 heart attacks prevented every year. Other published estimates run several times higher, depending on the model. What is not contested is the timeline. 32 state legislatures, a federal tax code, a Supreme Court case, blindfolded senator eating his own downfall on the Capitol floor, 72 years in Wisconsin alone. All of it aimed at a dye that never harmed a single person, and not one line of any of it aimed at the molecule that did. Go and look at that tub again. If it is a modern spread, it almost certainly contains no partially hydrogenated oil at all. The industry reformulated, mostly between 2010 and 2018. Different processes, different fats, different chemistry. The product America fought about for 90 years is not on the shelf anymore. And butter is back at 6.8 pounds a head. An all-time record, the highest ever measured. So the dairy lobby got what it wanted. It simply did not get it for any of the reasons it argued in public. Butter did not win because margarine was fake, or because it came out of a slaughterhouse, or because a senator did not care for the smell of it. Butter won because margarine's chemistry turned out to have a real problem. A problem created in a German laboratory in 1901 that nobody on either side of that 90-year war ever mentioned once, which leaves an uncomfortable question sitting on the table. If the official story of margarine was wrong for 100 years, how many of the other things on your plate have an official story that is just as wrong? Start with the one you would least expect. The Big Mac has a founding story that gets repeated in every corporate history. But the man who actually invented it, built it against orders, sold it out of a single restaurant in Pennsylvania, and came close to losing his job over it before headquarters took the credit. Watch that one next.